Joanne, I'm so happy to be here. I actually remember the first time we did this in the park. I miss our friend Peter. I miss him already. And this is such a wonderful tradition. We need to be supporting our community members. We're trying to raise awareness about emancipation, what it means to be free, what is the impact of anti-Black racism in our daily lives, in our personal, but also in our professional lives, right? So I'm going to provide a quick update on what's going on in Regent Park. Now, you know, most Regent Parkers, especially folks who've been living in this community for a very long time, remember the days when we didn't have developers, we were all one community, and I would say we were a social housing community, right? And what happened was, you know, our homes were not taken care of, especially by those responsible, those in TCHC. They will say, we don't have the budget, we can't do this maintenance. And things just got really, really worse. Then we were introduced to something called public-private partnership. The first 3 phases was with Daniels Corp, and they had a good deal, an amazing deal. They co-owned a lot of the retail spaces. You know, like the space where the paint box is right now. It's now called Zuzu Cafe. Guess who owns that space? It's Toronto Community Housing and Daniels Corp. So they co-owned a lot of the retail space. They promised to make sure that residents of Regent Park had a pathway to home ownership. So they introduced the Boost and foundational programs. These are programs funded by the federal government and provincial government. And it allowed 17 of our neighbors, so 17 TCC residents, to access home ownership. Joanne, and you know, being one of them, the Warners being an amazing example of folks who are able to access those opportunities and have that level of security, housing security, right? But we had hundreds of folks that didn't live in our community, many of them connected to our developers, or some were city staff, that also took advantage of this opportunity. And what they did is they all had to do was put a $5,000 deposit and commit to a mortgage, which by now is so affordable. We're talking about hundreds of dollars a month. And their homes went up in value astronomically, something that no one will ever imagine. It went up from $320,000 to $1.2 million. So you could be sitting in your washroom seat, right, for 5 years and became a millionaire, just like that, right? So the speculation in the housing market made it impossible for many folks to access home ownership. You had to pre-qualify, and Joanne has horror stories to tell you about being pre-qualified for owning a home and what she had to go through, especially as a Black woman, right? And these are things that we have learned from today. So thank you, Joanne, for setting the way. But these programs, Foundation and Boost, guess what? They stopped them. The programs no longer exist. So many residents that were promised a pathway to home ownership, to rent to own, actually were betrayed, right? Because the government just did not want to continue those programs because they said it was unsustainable. So what happened in phases 4 and 5? But before I go to phases 4 and 5, I just want to say that Daniels had a really good deal, right? And what they were able to do was leverage some of the money they were able to make with funding from other levels of government to create Daniels Spectrum, which you see today. It's one of the few community spaces that exist in Regent Park. Other agencies were able to access space like Yonge Street Mission, Dixon Hall. They were able to get space. And even your neighborhood association, now this is the new home, Daniels Spectrum. But no grassroots organizations were really able to manage and control their own space. So what did it look like? Well, it meant that folks would show up for events or programs between 9 to 5. When youth and seniors wanted to do something after 5 o'clock, they had to apply, or there were so many things you had to go through. And we didn't want that. We wanted to make sure that our seniors and our youth have access to their own space, their own community governed space, right? What residents also did was say, listen, we don't want developers to tell us what to build, where to build for phases 4 and 5. So we met, hundreds of residents came together to inform something called the Community Priorities Report. And that Community Priorities Report said, you know what, we need good jobs in our community. We need to have our own community space that we govern. We need rent to own. We need all this amazing, we need to have hard targets. So when there's money coming into our community, we hire locally. And at least 50% of the positions should be made available to local residents, right? So people have money to be able to own a home, or be able to live in this community. So those were practical ideas that many residents brought to fruition through advocacy. And what I mean by that is they pushed to be at the table. You know, RPA, the Regent Park Neighbourhood Association, many residents who are part of the coalition for community benefits came together and said, enough is enough. We don't want developers to be meeting in secret with TCHC, and we're not represented. Our interests are not represented. So we pushed for things to be done differently. One of the things that we did that is groundbreaking and is amazing is councillors in the past used to negotiate something called Section 37, which is community benefits, and they used to tell developers. And one very famous example, I'll share this story. Our old city councilor who passed away, Pam McConnell, negotiated with Donald Trump to get $1 million to pay for this pool. And a lot of people don't know that, right? That the Pam McConnell Aquatic Center was partially funded by Trump. So you could get more density for one of the buildings he was managing or responsible for, which is called now St. Regis. It used to be called the Trump Tower, right? Now it's called St. Regis. You know this, right? So that was the way of doing business, right? So a city councilor will sit with a developer like Trump and say, give me $1 million and I'll give you more density. And they'll take the money and try to put it into the community. We wanted things differently. We said, we want the community to decide how this money is spent. So when John Tory became mayor and basically wanted to change the developer in Regent Park, and I don't think he was fans of Daniel's Corp, because in the middle of the process, he said, we want requests for proposals. And we had Tridel, Capital, right? Another developer, Daniel's actually, apply to be the developer partner for phases 4 and 5. And who wouldn't? Look at the track record for Daniels. Daniels had a sweet deal. So remember how I said they co-owned the retail space? They owned some of the land in phases 1 to 3. So it wasn't co-ownership. So guess what? They bought it cheap. And then when the prices went up, they made more money. Right? And we assumed that they were going to put forward a bid to contribute something called community benefits for phases 1 and 5. So they did, but it wasn't good enough. And Tridel was selected as the developer partner for phases 4 and 5. Guess how much they offered? $26.8 million. And right now in the process, there's something called the Community Benefits Oversight Working Group to make sure the community decides how that money is spent. Okay? So that's the big win for the community. We did something right. Okay?
Try to take over North Regent, because I know where Daniels was.
Yes, they did. Yes, brother.
Daniels defaulted.
Yes.
And at the time, the price of the land went up.
Yes. They did take the land over for phases 4 and 5, but here's the new update. Now, here's why I'm here. So, 1 minute. So after they committed the $26.8 million, they didn't commit any money for rezoning. So let me tell you what rezoning means. Many people, all they have to do is, if you buy a property and you go through the process of rezoning, you basically unpack the value of the land. So a land could be worth 150,000. Now because you rezoned it, it's worth 1.5 billion. Okay? That's just by submitting the application and getting the approval from City Council that you can build high. You can build more, exactly. So guess what? We were told after Tridel got the bid, the Tridel TCC were going to rezone phases 4 and 5. It means they want to add more density. And this is about, the current plan is 13 buildings on Oak Street. So if you don't know me, I live on Oak Street. So on my street, we're expecting 13 buildings, some of them as high as 34 towers, 34 and 30, a lot of density. And what we said is that, what are the community benefits for this? What is it? What are you giving us? You know what they said? You know that community space you're talking about? We're going to give you community space. That's going to be your community benefits. So we argue, no. How are you rezoning, building more market units, and not respecting the fact that Regent Park is a social housing community, meaning that you should be introducing rent geared to income, RGI, right? So there's no RGI committed for phases 4 and 5. That's one thing you should know. Second thing that is very preposterous is the definition of affordable housing, right? So we want them to commit to the city's bylaw of making sure it's based on income, not based on market. They're saying the definition of affordable housing is 80% of market. Take this in. One bedroom is going for $3,000, right? Who in Regent Park can afford 80% of $3,000? Nobody, right? But that's what they're proposing that they may implement. So we gotta push back against this. I want to thank Joanne for giving me the opportunity to speak to all of you. I'd love to talk to you after this meeting. You can come and talk to me in the back. But right now, we are going to make sure that our city councilors, our new mayor, Olivia Chow, speaks to her commitment to making sure that housing is affordable in the city. We don't want rhetoric, we want action. And we want developers to be held accountable. And better yet, we want developers out of the game of building housing. Because you can't have for-profit developers building not-for-profit housing, right? Thank you so much.